thank you to our 3 sponsors for supporting our podcast. John Russell's Art Caterers and Milltown Pies, who offer fantastic catering services, Alexander Grace Law, who provide modern and client-led legal services, and SBE Furnishings, who offer high-quality furnishings and electrical items at fantastic prices.
Yeah, what brought it, was there something that kicked you into gear to think that, right, from now I'm going to knuckle down? How old were you then?
So when 2011.
21?
Yeah, 2021. I'd met my wife, Jez, funnily enough. Yeah, I met my wife and, she deserves some credit for that, for helping me settle down. And we sorted each other out, if that makes sense. Shelley will probably admit that she wasn't in a great place at the time, and we needed each other at the time. Unfortunately, initially, I put a lot of weight on, as you can probably remember back then. I put a lot of weight on because I'd stopped partying and started eating at weekends rather than just staying up all night.
Yes. What happened to MC at TNT? Has he disappeared forever?
No, definitely not. I did an event last year. Few and far between these days. It's a bit of a different lifestyle, is that, shall I say? And getting in at 5, 6 in the morning, trying to get to sleep and then go and play cricket just doesn't work.
Yeah, when lockdown's over, Green Hill will have you on one evening. You 12. You don't need to until 5 then. So 2011 comes along. How does what's that the start of that season like? What's your anticipation? It's Frankie's first year.
Yeah, so I missed all the build up because I got married in April, and then not long after that I went to Mexico for my honeymoon. 2011, I say this with great pleasure, that I wasn't part of the mess up at Bacup. I was in Mexico on my honeymoon. We were bowled out by Sipox for 40-something the first game of the season.
Yeah, that's right.
Were you there watching, Stanley?
I was, yeah. It wasn't great. It was touched on in Frankie's podcast, actually. And I think, Jez, in fact, you talk about it, don't you, within Frankie's podcast, where you say that the umpiring, shall we say, was a little. I know we all say this, but it was terrible.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, worst I've
ever. Joe kept the umpire honest by getting himself bowled to make it look like all the balls were hitting the stumps, which didn't go down particularly well, I don't think. But no, it was a strange start to the season. I remember Frankie turning up, and he turned up. Did you get married on the Easter Saturday, Ben, or? It was a Saturday, 16th of April. It was a Saturday. Yeah, and I remember that we'd had Frankie down at the club, and it was that Good Friday when it was absolutely boiling hot, wasn't it? And everyone was out on the pitch drinking.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and then obviously Frankie was on, as he said, a fairly modest salary, and then we went to Ben's wedding at the Oaks on the Saturday. And Frankie bought, there were literally 30 of us from the club or something, and Frankie came on and said, "I'm buying you all a drink." I remember thinking, that money he's got ain't going to last that long in here. So yeah, I do remember the start of the season. But then we went on a fantastic run, didn't we, after that?
Yeah, so I went on my honeymoon to Mexico after that. And then when I came back, my appendix burst at practice. So I left training in pain. Obviously, it didn't burst at training. Let me rephrase that. I started getting this pain during training, and then when I went home, it just got worse and worse and worse, and my appendix was about to burst, shall I say. And that is one of the most excruciating pains I've ever sort of had. But having that operation to take my appendix out put my comeback after my honeymoon even further back to well into the summer. And then when I finally was fit, I played in the seconds first, I think, rightly so. And then my first couple of games, single figures, nothing special. And then I got 97 against East Lancs, and that was the sort of full turning point in my career, shall we say. And the belief then after that was there that I could do it. I could open the batting, and I could do it at first team level.
Yeah, and you got 537 that year, didn't you? It's a good effort after the figures I've just given you earlier that you break the 500 mark for that season.
In 18 innings as well, Jez, looking at this.
Yeah.
Some go in that.
Yeah, so that's when you've thought, right, I can do this now. I want to make this opening role my own and work through that. And, obviously that's a fantastically successful period throughout the club. We've spoke before about Charlie Cottam getting the captaincy 2 or 3 years before that, and what a fantastic job he did. how did you progress from there, and how did you find playing under Charlie for that 3 or 4 year period?
Yeah, so it's amazing what cementing your place can do, isn't it? You know, again, you know, I don't blame any captain before that for this, but in the first team, you know, it's a decent level of cricket, and sometimes going out there feeling like you're playing for your spot or playing for your place, which in many cases you are, because you're in because someone's missing, is quite difficult. But
yeah.
I cemented my place, and that just bred confidence from there. And I sort of became, during 2011, Charlie's right-hand man out on the field, really, just being a sort of general nuisance, and I suppose using some of the tricks that I'd learned off the sort of strong Haslingden and Ramsbottom teams. I was starting to use those tricks to my advantage, and feeling a little bit confident, a little bit more confident about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, that's probably, you know, you're already alluding to what's happened 2 or 3 years later before you got the captaincy around Charlie. So from 2011, you know, you've had a great season then, 2012, 2013, winning trophies, etc. How was it when you're getting then towards this, you know, you're getting a lot of runs regularly, you've got your spit, you've got your spot, and then obviously you went pro in 2015. How was the build up to that throughout the 2014 season?
Yeah, so at the back end of the 2013 year, sort of the winter of the 2013 year, that's when the proing offers first came along.
Yeah.
And I actually turned down Heap to stay at Lowerhouse, but I've got to be honest, it was very flattering, and it made my ears prick up, because, you know, you look at the stats yourself, you know, 3 or 4 seasons before that, I was a million miles away of doing something like that.
Yeah.
But I felt I needed another good season behind me before I took the job of a proing job, and I didn't think I was quite ready. So, you know, I committed to playing in 2014, and I got off to a great start that season. But unfortunately, after a couple of games, I found myself banned and on the sidelines watching. Bit of an incident at Enfield involving an umpire and a fielding boundary flag.
Right, okay. Can you talk us through it, or is it another...
Yeah, no.
Of course.
Was just quickly, was the umpire Ersty that you fell out with? Was it the other one?
It was Brian Rutter.
Rutter. Yeah, not Ersty. Sorry, Rutter.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk out of term and upset anybody, but I was speaking to Dooch about this earlier on this afternoon. I'd already wound myself up about Brian before the game. He'd fired me, or I felt he'd fired me once or twice before this game, and I'd got off to a fantastic start that season. And before I even went out to bat, I was convinced I was going to get fired. So I was already wound up. And like all opening batters, you're never out, are you? But I've honestly inside edge one onto my pad off Hassan Fazal, and Brian's fired me. And I actually got banned for damaging the field of play or damaging cricketing equipment or something along those lines.
Interfering with the field of play, something it is, isn't it?
Yeah. But I've got to be honest, I give Brian an absolute mouthful. He probably didn't hear the most of it. But then, quite funny, as I'm walking off, who put a boundary flag there? But I see the boundary flag out the corner of my eye. Take a swipe with my bat. The boundary flag goes flying, smashes into pieces. But funnily enough, you know the concrete section at Enfield where the forms are. My bat's gone about 20 yards up in the air and landed on the concrete and smashed all the back of it. And one of the lads has had to go and pick it up. I'm not interested. There's a woman passing me on the steps. I'd give her a mouthful as well. I'm sorry to say. I know it doesn't sound great, but I was just I just lost my head basically. And I deserved banning, really.
Yeah, so that obviously started, that is only, you haven't even got to the end of April then. So
no,
just a very quick story about that.
Yeah.
And it's, we might have to edit this bit out because my mum's told me I'm not allowed to swear on these. So we might have to beep it. But Burnley were playing at home that day, football. So I'm fairly sure I've been down to the turf, and I sort of heads over to Enfield, and Corbus was only in about his second or third game, wasn't he? And so I heads to Enfield, drives through, parks at the back of the club at Enfield, walks down the steps where the thing were, and Corbus is fielding on the boundary in front of the benches at the top there. And as I walks down, I said, "How you doing, Corby?" And he turned around and he looked at me and he pointed out to the umpire, which was Brian Rutter.
I know where you're going, if I remember now.
He goes, "Stanny, that cunt's guessing." And it
Please
just
don't
really made me
Don't
laugh.
edit that. It's funny. Don't edit it.
We'll have to beat the C-bomb out, and my mum will go mad. But it really tickled me because he was absolutely raging, and he just, as he points out towards him and says that, brilliant.
Oh, funny.
From that, how many game ban did you get from that, Ben?
So I got a 2-game ban.
Right.
So sat on the sidelines watching for a couple of games. I think, luckily for me, there was an LCB Cup game in there as well. So I think it only ended up being 1 league game and an LCB Cup game. But yeah, the story sort of moves on after that and comes to sort of picking the team when I'm back available.
Yeah. So go on, what happened then?
Well, like I said before getting banned, I'd had a decent start. And obviously I'd had 2 or 3 good seasons behind me before that. But the decision was made that I wasn't walking straight back in. Wasn't walking straight back into the first team. And I've got to be honest, I didn't take that very well.
Right. What happened? What were the circumstances of that? Who told you that?
Yeah. So just to delve into it a little bit more. Before this season, Paul Stanley had been manager, along with Charlie being the captain. But I think, if my memory serves me right, at the start of this season, for whatever reason, Paul had taken a break, or Charlie had wanted to have a little go on his own. So Paul wasn't involved at the time. So Charlie had all this on him, and it was a tricky situation looking back. A lot of good players at this stage vowing for a couple of positions at the top of the order.
It was 2 from 3, wasn't it? It was 2 from the three. The 3 were you, Jack Edgar, and Johnny Whitehead.
Yeah. So Stan was heavily involved because Paul had taken a break, and they'd come to the conclusion that I wasn't walking straight back in, and still to this day, if I'm honest, I still think I was in the right, or had a point to feel aggrieved. I could understand that I was banned. I suppose it depends on which side of the fence you sit on, but ultimately you want your best team on the field, and I felt quite strongly that I was in that best 11, and I didn't take it very well. In fact, I was very close to leaving, but I'm so glad I didn't, looking back, because that's not what I'm about. So I bit my lip, bit my tongue, and played the 2 second-team games and did fairly well, and got in a few weeks later. But Matthew, I'm sure you'll remember, that period was really, really tough. And I don't say this with great pride, but it nearly ripped the heart out of the club at the time.
It was. I'd only recently taken over from Renners, sort of the winter before. Corbus was effectively my first pro signing, and I think what actually caused the problem more than anything at that point was that Jack Edgar had a good start to the season as well, hadn't he? And I think we ended up in a position where they have to leave somebody out. Ben's sort of left himself out of the team by his actions at Enfield. And rightly or wrongly, I think that was what made the decision for them. They looked and they said, we've got Johnny, who's had an okay start. We've got Jack, who's had a good start. Ben, who's had a decent start but let himself down. So Ben, you're the one who misses out. And it was perhaps wasn't handled as best it could be. I remember Ben, you spoke to Corbus, didn't you, to seek his views. Corbus, I don't think was particularly. He was new to the club.
I think
didn't know a lot of people at the time. He was ringing me saying, "I don't really want to get involved."
Yeah, I think it was slightly a different way around. I think Stan seeked Corbus's opinion, and I agree with you. I don't think that there was, in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best thing to do because he just got off the plane and didn't know anybody.
Yeah, so it was a strange time, and it's another one, isn't it, where in hindsight, when you look back now, because ultimately what it all finishes with this is that we leave Jack Edgar out a few weeks later. Ben gets back in, gets a score. I think Ben, I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, did all right. Slowly got back.
Yeah, and I think Ben gets a score. Jack has a bit of a sticky patch. We leave Jack out, and he hasn't played a game for the club since, I think, to my knowledge.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It's one of those where we were always going to upset somebody, I think, at the point that Ben came back. We started by upsetting Ben, ended up upsetting Jack, and sadly lost one of those players along the way. But difficult times.
What month would we be in when that was happening, Stanley?
May, weren't it? Start of May, around the bank holiday weekend of May.
Right.
Maybe just a bit later.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I suppose Fergus is in and doing a job. Johnny Russell's there, Matt Walker. There's some great players there.
Johnny White, yeah. There is, like I say, it was one of those teams where it was full of good players.
Yeah.
And I think if Jack hadn't have had the start to the season he'd had, he would obviously been the one that missed out. But I think it was just one of those things where, well, Jack's had a good start. You've let yourself down, Ben, by your actions. And I vividly remember Ben saying to me at the time, I'm being punished twice. And he's probably right in saying that, isn't he? He is, to some extent, you've served your punishment for the discretion, and then you're punished again a couple of weeks later when you're not picked for the team. So he was probably right in saying that. But
yeah,
should have dropped Finch. Finch was playing. Should have binned him off.
But just to touch upon this, Jez, I was having this discussion with Duke earlier, just for the listeners and people who don't play the game but come down watching and have seen me, going out to bat in big games. That day, I played 2 second team games before I got back in the side. I played at Tomodon, the first one, and I played against Accrington at home in the second one. And those first few overs at Tomodon for the second team is the most nervous I've ever felt in any game, and that's just being honest. And I know I played in Worsley Cup finals. I've had a first bowler in a Worsley Cup final against Burnley, but I can say, hand on heart, I put so much pressure, and I was so wound up, put so much pressure on myself that day at Tomodon. And luckily, I did get a score, but the first 20 runs must have been the most ugly 20 I've ever got, and I was just, I was shaking wreck when I went out to bat.
Yeah, no, it is
funny how that can happen.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because you're putting yourself under so much pressure.
Can I introduce you, please, to Maggie's famous pie and peas? We appear to have lost one. Where the f*** is Rusty gone?
So, Ben, with the 2016 season, it's your first year back. There's a game that comes to mind, Burnley at home. We get stuffed, but there is some interesting images that we've got around some incidents that went on. What occurred there? We had Dieter as our pro. What happened there?
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, Jez, it was my first derby game back, and it was Dieter's first derby game. And I think the lads had been, building it up during the week. There might have been a little bit in the press and on social media. And I think Burnley maybe won the league the season before that, 2015, or definitely won it pretty recently. So, a decent side. So, you could feel the atmosphere before the game. Busy day, busy derby game. We've got a fast bowler who's a bit of a loose cannon at times in our ranks. And they've got some quick bowlers as well in Cole Lehman and Tom Lawson. And for once, it wasn't me who started all the aggro. Right. It wasn't Michael Kelly either, which is surprising. It was actually young Tom Lawson. And I say young because the incident that started it all was an appeal down the leg side for a caught behind while Dieter was on strike. Umpire says not out. And Tom Lawson then goes on to give Dieter the biggest mouthful I've ever witnessed from a lad of that age, and some really offensive words in there. And he might deny it, but I was at the non-strikers end, and I can remember. And Dieter didn't take very kindly to this. I started walking after him back to his mark, and the game just ground to a halt. Before you know it, sort of surrounded by Burnley players, getting it from all angles. One of which was Vishal Tripathi, and as I've already alluded to earlier on, me and Vishal were very close, and I was used to getting stick off Barrett or sledge him, however you want to put it. I was used to that. That's always happened, but I've not received much off Vishal, and I didn't take too kindly to that day. It sort of shocked me.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting it at all, and then from that moment, you're talking early doors here in the game, and we weren't doing very well.
Yeah.
From that moment, the game was just on a knife edge, and to be honest, the umpires didn't have control of it, and it wasn't a very pleasant game, if I'm honest.
No, and we got stuff with 14, 15 overs to go. I was on the game. I remember it was just so unpleasant. They beat us fair and square. It wasn't pleasant at all. And I remember Charlie batting. He got, I think we're 121 for 9 or something ridiculous. And then Charlie and Lewis put on quite a few. And then the Burnley players start having a pop at Lewis, which, we all know what Lewis is like. They might not, but did appear a little bit unkind.
Yeah,
absolutely. Is that the point you jumped off the decking and ran back on the pitch, Ben?
Yes. Not one of my proudest moments, but, I'd like to think, regardless of what people think of me across the league or in any walk of life, I'd like to think that I'm a fair bloke and a man of principle, and I'll stick up for my muckers as well. That's one thing I will say.
Yeah.
And from how I could see it, it was the end of the innings and they were following Charlie and Lewis off and getting in Lewis's face a little bit, and I just didn't take too kindly to that. Didn't sit well with me at all. So I felt I had to do something and stick up for my pals a little bit. So it did involve me going back onto the field of play, which I probably shouldn't have done.
These things happen, Ben. These things happen. You've come back in that 2016. Obviously, it's massively welcome back. One of our own get back into routine of playing first 11 cricket and get us back into winning ways. And then you've got the captaincy in 2017. Obviously, very, very proud to carry that role. What's your thoughts around the couple of years around your captaincy, the 2 or 3 years, and how you're feeling how that went?
Yeah, it's definitely incomplete at the moment.
Right.
I'm nowhere near finished what I set out to do, and I have enjoyed it definitely.
Yeah.
I'm pleased that my own performances have managed to stay for the majority at a decent level, because there was a bit of a thing made about the fact that, and rightly so, that that Charlie had dropped himself down the order a little bit too far and got a little bit silly in that respect. So I was adamant that I was going to be captain, stick my chest out and go and open the batting. So I'm pleased about that. Obviously, we've had a Worsley Cup win along the way and an LCB Cup final appearance. That day especially, I think we'll get onto that in a minute, but that day especially will always stay with me. But I suppose overall, Jez, I'm fairly happy. It's had its ups and downs. Last year was very, very tough. I'm not going to lie, very, very tough. Obviously, passing on my granddad during the season was very difficult for me and my uncle and my family. But then we just never got, I don't know, just either never settled or never found the right formula. We were there or thereabouts and then had a terrible finish. But, along with the passing of my granddad, there was a lot of other off-the-field stuff going on last year that was difficult, and I'm sure Dooch will back me up.
Go on, Dooch.
Well, it was just like what we were talking about earlier about, some players making it a little bit difficult during the week and at weekends. I mean, during the week it's fine because you can park it when you get to weekends, but if that kind of behaviour spills over into games, then it causes a problem not just for that individual but for everybody else who's in the immediate vicinity.
Well, I was listening to a podcast today, I don't know who it was, or walking around, and it was yesterday, and really interesting. He was a footballer, and he said one bad apple, and it doesn't need to be a noisy apple, it doesn't need to be someone that's high profile, can really upset a dressing room. And I thought about it as you know what, you're right there. You can have the best players in the world and competent players. You only need that one little mischief maker that is stirring up the way outside the dressing room. And that again, are we in a position we can leave these sort of players out? I don't know, Ben. It's tough on the captain. It's Joe's doing a great job supporting you, but they are tough decisions, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And Dooch is absolutely right. We've alluded to it earlier on, and certain players in and out of the side, but did get opportunities at different stages. Might not have been the biggest of opportunities, but certainly weren't in the side as fielders, shall we say? And I like people playing with me who you don't have to be tough and strong or aggressive, but I like people who can grit the teeth and try and get through a little bit of adversity. Pretty similar to some of the stuff that I've been through that we've spoken about on this podcast. And I think that's what's being a team, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. And it's sometimes, I think I had this conversation with Frankie. I think you edited it, Stanley. That it's not the, your 170 against Great Harwood or a fantastic 7 or 8. It's someone who's batting at 8. Just the ball keeps. Duke, you were an expert when you were a lot younger. Before you mastered that cross bat straight 8 for 6, where you just make sure it hit your pads. Swap bat, straight bat. It still is. It works. He's batting the straight. His bat was parallel with the floor, but it still went into the scoop. Just someone that could let, Joe would understand that, right, I need to just manipulate this field a little bit. We're not going anywhere. So 2 leg byes, then you get the pro, it's 2 4s. Then all of a sudden the amateur gets a few runs and the game's won, and the scorecards don't read anything, but it's just that art of winning, just that art of doing something different. I don't know, it's tough. It is tough.
Frankie touched on it, didn't he, Jez, where Frankie sort of did it in a subtle manner in his podcast. He names Ben as an outstanding player in the 2011 season, but then says that the rest of the players around it just did little bits and didn't necessarily contribute massive amount. But he also touches on the fact that in his opinion, all those players, they were young, they were up and coming, they were coming through. They were happy with a lot. They were happy just to be there at that point and just to be part of this juggernaut that got rolling. Yeah. And it's only when the years progress and again, as we've touched on earlier, that there's not roles for everybody, that you start then to get a little bit of friction within your camp, don't you? Where everyone wants to be the star player, and not everyone can be, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is the game that we play. You cannot have a team of 11 Blazers or 6 Blazers and 5 Jezzers. It just simply does not work. No. There's not enough for all of them to do
every week. Yeah,
exactly. Or for large chunks of the season, there's not enough for all of them to do and keep at that level. So I think that's why it attracts a lot of players, because people like me, you can get by in a side, contributing 3 or 4 times a season, 5 times a season maybe, but then 5 times without them, the side maybe doesn't get over the line. But stats, when you look back at a career, for those types of player are sharp looking at stats on a piece of paper, but there's a bit more to it than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's how we get that across, isn't it? Or how, as a club. Ben, so that's fantastic. What you've said there, it's work in progress. You realise that there's things to happen. We've got a great MD and committee around that will listen to you, around professionals and, the amateurs that come into the game. They're moving a lot more than they have done previously. But, I think the club's in a great position having you as a first-team captain. Matt, have you got any thoughts on Ben's performance over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think Ben's grown as a captain as he's gone along. I think what he would probably admit himself in his first season, maybe a little bit sort of intense in his ways, and that maybe sometimes switches certain people, not switches them off, but they don't necessarily always go along at that level of intensity. And when you are that intense, it's difficult to accept that somebody else is quite there with you. I think one of the challenges for Ben since he's been captain is that he's never had a chance to pick his own pro as well. And I think that's one of my big frustrations about the current situation we found ourselves in this year, is that effectively when Ben took the captaincy, we'd already signed Oki before Charlie decided to stand down. And then Oki had a good season. We re-sign him. He then gets injured. It's the right thing to do to re-sign him. So he's effectively had 3 seasons as captain, Ben, where he's not had that opportunity to actually make his own stamp on that. And with an amateur team, often the pro's the only thing you can change, isn't it? You can, especially a club like us where we generate our own players, so to speak. The pro is the only thing that you can sort of influence and change to freshen things up. And I'm sure Ben will talk about it, but I think that's probably been something that's been difficult for him, because he's where we've given him the pro. This year he had his full say in who the pro was going to be. I'm sure he's as frustrated as I am that we're not getting to see see how that's all pans out right now.
Yeah, but it's good to hear that's what the club are allowing the first team skipper to do. I'm sure, let's see, next year, if we can get him back, and if we can't, then let's listen to what what Ben wants for his amateurs. Dooch, is there anything about Ben's captaincy? He spoke very well around it all. I'm sure you'll bring him down in flames.
I just wanted to mention a point that me and Gary discussed on a previous podcast about captaincy, and you touched on how it impacts you as a player. And me and Gary kind of come to a landing that we thought that captaincy perhaps is better suited to somebody who has a slightly lesser role in the team. Obviously, you're captaining and opening the batting, two huge roles to consider every time you go out to play. And first of all, I would imagine it's very draining. Coming off the field, I remember coming off the field as a captain sometimes at the end of the fielding innings thinking, fucking hell, I need half an hour here because I'm absolutely spinning. For you then have to do that and then go out to bat must be difficult.
Yeah, no, it is, and I take great pride in the fact that I've still been a huge contributor to the team while I've been captain. But you're absolutely right, Luch, and especially triple headers. Some of the players in the dressing room as well. Even though I love them to bits, you've got people like Frankie in there who just don't stop and just waffle and talk shy. But yeah, no, you lose the toss on a warm day, you fag some leather, you don't have any tea because you're about to strap up and go out to bat. So yeah, no, I do take pride in that, and I was adamant I was going to try and stay the best player I could be. And like I say, didn't have the best year last year. Still managed to score a few and contribute, but there was lots going on around my head, around the inside of my head, should I say, at certain times. So yeah, I'm looking forward now. Just looking forward. Whatever's gone on before has gone, and I'm still hungry to go on and win some trophies.
Fantastic. That's great to hear, Ben. Again, let's hope we get a little bit of cricket this year. If we don't, then let's get ready for the year after. But as we've all, you've a lot of support at the club. There's a lot of people there willing to either listen or, no one will push the noses in. But don't be scared of allocating stuff. Don't be scared of giving people, the role of an individual leader and let them, get the ropes. But more importantly, if you're ever in doubt whether you should bat or bowl yourself, do it and then worry about it afterwards. Whereas a lot of other captains have done it the other way. You think, no, I'll not do it now. And then I might do it next time, and it's a lot of bollocks. So if there's nothing else from our presenters...
just one little thing, Jez, I'd like to just add at the end as a bit of a sort of wrapping up thing. I think it's been fascinating, really, this, because when we look at Ben, we think Ben's been at Lowerhouse all his life, effectively. He's always been around the place and what have you. But we've heard all these stories tonight, haven't we? It's not all been straightforward. It's not all been plain sailing. There's been doubts and things along the way for him that perhaps the listeners, ourselves even, who've been close to him all these years, maybe didn't appreciate or understand along the way. But then we've got a player whose captain is decorated insofar as honours within the league. But then, from a personal point of view, 70-odd in a Worsley Cup final, 70-odd in a T20 final, 60-odd in a LCB Cup semi-final, 80-odd in a Worsley Cup semi-final. And I'm sure there's others that I've missed off that have been sort of crucial knocks along the way. And it just shows you, doesn't it, that all that stuff that Ben's talked about has been massively character building. And he's a big game player who does it when it really matters.
Yeah, no, they're great words, that, Stanley. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks very much for your contributions. We'll get
no problem.
As soon as possible, and good luck for next year.
No problem. Can I just slip one last thing in there, Jez?
Of course you can.
Sorry to be a bit soppy, but I just want to say a big thank you to my wife, Shelley Heap. It's not easy being a cricketing wife and a mum at the same time during a hectic season, and honestly, she's a diamond and she deserves a gold medal, because as it's no secret that my daughter's doing very well and she's up and down the country playing everywhere in a normal summer, and then she comes and supports me every game as well, so a big shout out to her.
Very nice to hear that, Ben.
Well done, Ben. Well done.
Cheers, fellas, I've really enjoyed that.
See you soon.
That's been good.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
ordered. Send more house to save the house.